So in the first video of chapter 6, I talked about how different businesses employ different resources, but we can actually classify these resources, these different various resources into one of four groups. So these four groups that we can actually classify these resources as are land, labor, capital, and management. These four right here. So let's dive into what each one is. So whenever we talk about land, whenever we use that term land, we're not talking about just the land and natural resources. Although that is a component about it, we're talking about the biological resources that come into it. So we're talking about land and natural resources, the minerals, the forests, the groundwater that's part of that component. This land input also is classified as renewable and non-renewable resources. So one key aspect for farming, one key land input for farming is actually the topsoil. So whenever you're farming, the topsoil and the nutrients in the topsoil is a very key input, especially for row crop production and even for livestock production. I mean, it's critical for pretty much all aspect of biological growth, that topsoil is. So that is a key input whenever we're talking about farming. So land is a part of this topsoil, or topsoil is a part of this land aspect. Also the minerals in the ground. So if we're going to talk about land, we're also going to be talking about coal or the petroleum that's in that ground, that non-renewable resources that are located in the ground. But we're also talking about the wind on top of that ground, that in case you've got maybe a wind turbine and you're using that as electricity. Or if you've got an old well where you are using wind to power that windmill, that wind is part of that land input, as well as that groundwater that's being pulled out of the ground. So land is our non-renewable and renewable resources that's encompassed in that. The second aspect, the second classification, is labor. So labor is all labor services used in production except for managerial activities. So land or labor could be, maybe it's somebody driving a tractor for you, a ranch hand that's driving a tractor, or a ranch hand that's working cattle for the day, or maybe it's just hired help to help out on that piece of property, or it's maybe even the manager who takes a step away from those managerial activities and actually goes out and does the labor alongside of the rest of the laborers. Or maybe it's a person farming by themselves. Whenever they're doing the labor to produce that good, that's classification of labor. But whenever they're handling the managerial activities, such as handling the balance sheets and the enterprise budgets and making managerial decisions, that's going to actually fall under this management aspect. So labor is all labor services that are used in the production of the good. Now, capital. Capital is the manufactured goods such as fuel, chemicals, tractors, trucks, buildings, things like that. Those are those manufactured goods. So whenever I say capital, we should not confuse it with financial capital. Capital is not the same thing as financial capital. So financial capital is basically the cash in your business. Well, whenever I talk about capital as in terms of an input, it is the manufactured goods, not the cash that's in your checking account or the stocks and bonds that a company may have or the loans that they may have. It's not that. It's the manufactured goods. Things like fuel, chemicals, tractors, trucks, buildings. Now, the key classification of this capital is it does not provide direct customer satisfaction. These manufactured goods, this capital does not provide direct satisfaction, but yet it aids in the production of other goods and services. So let's take tractors, for example. These tractors do not provide a direct input into customer satisfaction. You driving a tractor isn't going to make the regular Joe Blow down at the store happy, but it aids in producing that particular commodity that does go to direct customer satisfaction. It aids in producing that beef that's going to provide that consumer satisfaction, or it aids in producing that bread that the producer or the consumer is going to eat, but they're not really going to get any enjoyment out of the actual tractor itself. Just like chemicals, the consumers aren't going to be going out and saying, "Oh, this has chemicals in it. I'm going to be happy about that. It's providing direct satisfaction." No, but those chemicals that are used, those pesticides, those herbicides that provide for your farm to become, your farm or operation to become more efficient, it helps in aiding in the production of other goods and services that does provide that consumer satisfaction. The aspect that it does not provide direct customer satisfaction is a key component of these capital goods. Now, whenever we get into capital goods, we have two different classifications of these manufactured goods, or of this capital. These two classifications are durable and non-durable goods. So durable goods are used up in their production period. Non-durable goods are those that are used up in their production period. Chemicals, fertilizer, things that are typically used up within a year. We say if they're going to be used up within a year, they're considered pretty much non-durable goods. Examples of other non-durable goods, like we say, we have fertilizer, we have chemicals. Fuel is more of a non-durable good because it's going to be used up within that production period. Hay is typically used up within that production period, so it's typically a non-durable good. Things that are going to be used up within that production period. Whereas durable goods are utilized over a period of years, over a period of production time. So things like barns and equipment. So you go out and buy a tractor. You're not going to go out and buy a tractor to use it for 1 year and use it up within 1 year unless you're really working it hard. But in most cases, you're not doing that. So equipment are more of those durable goods because they're going to last longer. You're going to use them over several production cycles. Whereas barns, you're going to use those over several production cycles. You don't build a barn to use it that year and be done with it. You build a barn to use it over several years, over several production cycles. Whereas stuff like chemical, fertilizer, feed, a lot of times, feed is going to be used up within that production cycle. So that's the difference between durable and non-durable. Durable are going to be used up in over a course of years. Non-durables are typically used up within a year or in a shorter time span. So management are the functions. Management functions vary, and they're easier to conceptualize and measure. So, for example, we know that it's a critical aspect of a farm or ranch to handle the finances and to make those production decisions and to decide whether or not we're going to buy this tractor, if we're going to buy a new tractor or a used tractor, or how should we plant this year versus last year, and what inputs are we going to use. It makes a lot of those production decisions. And it's easy to conceptualize that, but it's not really easy to measure. Whereas if we're going to talk about inputs from land, we could talk about the number of acres or the amount of lumber that we're pulling off of that land or the amount of water that we're utilizing. We can measure that. Whenever we're talking about labor, we're going to be talking about labor in hours. How many hours did people put in to produce this particular amount of goods? That's easy to measure. We can measure how much fuel or how much chemicals we used to produce that good. We can measure these durable and non-durable goods. But it's not really all that easy to measure those financial decisions or those managerial decisions. It's easier to conceptualize them. But this management, they make those production decisions. And because it's not as easy to measure, we're actually going to leave the management aspect out for the majority of this chapter. We understand it's an important aspect, but from the this input standpoint, from the theoretical aspect of trying to find the maximum amount of production or the profit maximizing area, we're going to go ahead and leave it out of this chapter. Instead, we're going to actually focus on the technical relationship between inputs and outputs. So what is the ideal amount of inputs that we should use while we're seeking this profit maximization standpoint? So we're going to be looking at the technical relationships rather than the managerial decisions. And those technical relationships are going to be bringing in the labor, the capital, and the land more so than the managerial. So several key relationships between the level of outputs and the level of inputs. We must understand several of these key relationships before we consider prices. So we're going to talk about these technical relationship between output and input, and that technical relationship is actually known as the concept of the production function. So we're going to start diving into the production function, and the production function is an input-output relationship, and we're going to bring in the concept of marginal and average product. And that's what's coming up next in this chapter.